So I need to explain that I'm Pam Muth, and I work with Lisa. I'm the Executive Director of Research and Strategy for the Social Research Center. We are the organization that the Commonwealth Department of Education and Training has contracted to do the quilt. And this has been going since 2009, I believe. Lisa's been around for a long time, so she's really the person who knows everything about quilt. The reason I'm at all here today even is because she was on jury duty. And so it's one of those things where it's like, oh my God, I'm on jury duty, you need to do my presentation. Oh no. I'm sure we've all been in that situation before. So I know her presentation now, but she's a much better person to give it than I am. So I'm just going to do the first 3 slides. So the first one was just the introduction, and then just a quickie about the Social Research Center. As some of you probably know, we've been around for 20-some years. Have been recently purchased by the Australian National University. So we're subsidiaries of ANU. Our services include survey research. We do, QUILT is a very big survey. It's 700,000 is the end for the SCS. We also do like the AEDC, the Australian Early Development Index. We do lots of the population health surveys. It's one of the major things we do. We do things like cognitive interviewing, testing, qualitative research, statistical consulting, program and policy evaluation, and data analytics. And again, for the quilt part of what we do, we're contracted by the Department of Education. Okay, so what Lisa is going to do, thank goodness for you, because she's so much better at this than I am. But she's
overselling it.
So she's going to describe to you about what quilt really is, because we're sort of assuming that not all of you know intimately about quilt. So we think this is a huge opportunity to let you know what quilt is and how you can use it, because we really do want people to use the data. It's quite incredible, really. Some benchmarking stuff. She's going to talk a bit about the quilt website. We're doing a bit of rejigging with that you're going to want to know about. And then what is the SES, or the Student Experience Survey? So she's going to go in detail, well, sort of in detail, and the results, and then how we analyze the results. And then integrating the quilt data into your institutional systems and processes, which is one of the things we're really trying to work with universities at this point now. Now that we have many collections, and the data is just right for you to use within your institution and system. So with that, I'll turn you over to the very capable Lisa.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, I did get out of jury duty. They didn't even have to take a look at me. It's fantastic. So I'm just we're really going from a ground-up movement with the last presentation to a top-down thing. It's been designed by government and implemented across the sector. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what these surveys collect, because what's measured matters, and what you see in these kinds of surveys are the sorts of things that government think are important and the sorts of practices that they think are in institutions. And quite often they're very lag indicators. They're quite old-fashioned in many ways. But the quilt surveys can be customised, and we'll talk a bit about that, because the sector can actually take some control of these instruments in order to measure what really matters and to be able to speak truth to power, to be able to get the data and show government what should be measured, and to be able to tell the story to regulators like TEXA and those kinds of things. So the QUILT program, Quality Indicators for Learning and Teaching, I don't know if it came up with the acronym. The minister hates it, I might tell you. We're all hiding under a blanket somewhere. But certainly it is what it is now. We call it clown vomit colours. I'm kind of fond of it now, really. So QUILT, I think like Nike, it's just a thing now. It's all good. The strength of it is that it is independently administered by the Social Research Centre. We're contracted by the Department of Education and Training. It's a 3-year contract, so we're in our second contract period now. The sample for the surveys is drawn directly from HESA. So under the HESA Act, which is Higher Education Support Act, we act as agents of the department. So for any institution that's under HESA, we actually can access all of the student demographic and enrolment data, and that's what we use to drive the surveys, and that's what we use to do all that demographic stuff underneath them. They're consistent, it's online only, we don't do telephone surveying. If those of you who may have grown up in the olden days, like me, the old Australian graduate survey, each institution did it their own way, desperate to get 50%, we begged them. We used to beg students to do it, go to enrolment, go to graduation, give students pieces of paper begging them to fill out the survey. It wasn't consistent, the data was dodgy at best. So now we're doing, we do stratified sampling, which means that we try to get representativeness across these surveys. So we really push the institutions for that. The institutions can watch the surveys live. We have a reporting portal. I went in there before and to see, because we've got one in field currently, the Student Experience Survey. So, you can't help yourself. So the institutions actually go in and see what their response rates are looking like daily, actually minute by minute. We also do intensive strata follow-up, so we contact institutions and study areas which aren't representative, and we push much harder for our response maximisation in those areas. And there's also flexibility for institutions. So an institution with an additional offshore campus can add them. This is fee for service, tragically. We are the dark side. It's a private company. But we can do additional populations. Institutions can take a census if they want to and get more responses. They can add additional items to the survey. A number of institutions, Monash University of the Year added a lot of items to the end. And a number of institutions add items as a consortia. So I think about 15 institutions do a workplace relevance scale. There's all that opportunity. And we do top-up telephone surveying. So we will do telephone interviews for areas where an institution wants to get a big response rate, say they're evaluating a course or a methodology, but that's not included in the national data to avoid any low bias. So there's kind of, I know it looks like 3 surveys, kind of 4. There's a student experience survey, which is a survey of current students. That's in field right now, about August. We might do another one in September. It looks at the educational experience and engagement of current, commencing and completing. It used to just be undergrad, but last year we started postgrad coursework. So that survey's in field now. There's the graduate outcome survey. That's the one of recent graduates, 4 to 6 months after they finished. I know it's early, but it's consistent with the old one, and the government doesn't like change. So it's 4 to 6 months after they finished, regardless. And we also use that as the sample for the employer satisfaction survey. So we say, if you're working, give us your supervisor details, and then we contact the supervisors for the employer satisfaction. It's our problem child. Probably only about 14-15% of students are willing to give us their data. There tends to be people in their forever job. But what we do find from that is the employers are more satisfied with the students' generic skills capability than the students are themselves. So it's kind of a good news story, but it's just an interesting exercise. It's not really something you can use at the institution level. But we also do, and I think this is the most powerful one, the GOS longitudinal. So we follow them up 3 years later, and that's where we see the movement of people 4 to 6 months up to 3 years after they finish their course and where they are now. And so that one's really interesting and worth a read. That national report should be coming out soonish. I don't know if it's the whim of the minister, but hopefully soonish that one will come out. We're also going to contact those students probably annually after the GOS, and we want to get some point-in-time data. So what we'll be able to give back to the institutions is 4 to 6 months out, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years of data. Okay. it's on the student life cycle. So the QILT website is potential students can get on and make comparisons between institutions on the basis of the main government-inspired performance indicators. Then you have your SES commencing and final year students, the graduate outcomes survey 4 to 6 months out, the employer survey where we use the graduate one as our sample, and then the longitudinal GOS after that. Okay. I'll smash it through them now.
Can I just ask, what happens to the research students? Does anyone ever ask about their experience?
We do them for the graduate surveys, all of them, but currently they're not on the current student one because post-grad by research is difficult to handle. We ask a lot of questions. There's the post-grad research experience, post-grad by research experience questionnaire, which is added to the graduate outcome survey. It's a lag indicating that it's looking back at their course, but there's a lot of questions in there. But asking one student about one thing becomes difficult. So no, we don't have a good one for that yet. And all of that said, context is important when benchmarking. So the QILT website just compares the study areas between institutions. And yes, it's a consistent methodology, it's a consistent sampling. We try to get representativeness, but it's apples and apples, but it's a Granny Smith and a Red Delicious. And when you look at the very small, nuanced newies, the non-universities, they're like a little Nashi pear. They kind of look like an apple, and not exactly an apple. So context is everything, and when you are looking at your data, you need to take into account your context, your student profile in terms of how many engineers you've got, business students compared to creative arts, the student demographic profile, if you're a VU compared to a Melbourne uni, who are your students and what are you trying to achieve for them, and the location. If you're looking at graduate outcomes and you're in Western Australia, very different animal to if you're in Sydney or in Melbourne. So context is everything, and this sort of data you can use to tell your story. So you can show our students may not get the same employment outcomes, but when you look at the demographic, this is important. Okay. So that said, the QILT website, probably just undermined it a little bit, but it allows prospective students to get in and look at up to 6 institutions against the performance criteria that are coming in from the QILT surveys. When we tested this with students, we did a lot of testing with international students because we're about to change it. It's slightly less clown comedy. There'll be a nerd section and a compare section for the students. I was heading somewhere with that. I lost my train. It allows the students to get in and compare up to 6 institutions on those performance indicators. And we're currently redesigning it so that the students can get a better sense of less schizophrenic around the surveys and the outputs, and just looking at the outputs so they can compare. We'll keep going. It may come back to me.
You have international students.
Oh, that's it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
The international students were gobsmacked that a government would allow this kind of student voice information to be out there in the public. That they would simply publish what students were saying and putting it up here. Because effectively what it is the students talking to the students. This is the students' evaluation of various things. And the international students were surprised that any government would put that kind of information out. So I think there is a strength in it. It could be so much better if we had 100% response rates. But we have to do it at study area level, because by the time you get to institution by study area, you're starting to get small cells, confidence intervals go, so it becomes rubbish. So what they can do is they can put in either a course name, an occupation, or an institution to compare. So here I've put aeronautical engineer, kind of what came to me at the time. So if you type aero, it will give you a list. You can choose from the list. Okay. Once you get there, it says aeronautical engineer matches into engineering study area because it's all mapped to these grouped areas. The English website for this implies that the data is at the course level, but it's kind of not. It needs to be at this aggregated level, otherwise you don't have enough data because you've probably got 6 people in each course. Melbourne Uni, the Melbourne model, has big courses with everybody in there and then pretends they're all a Bachelor of Arts. But in fact, you're looking at a lot of little underlying majors. This is how we're aggregating them together to get the kind of robustness that you need. So you can choose up to your 6 institutions. I just went with any 6 because it's where it took me. So they can add them to compare, okay? And that's only institutions that have data enough data in that area. And so that's what the students see currently. Hopefully it will look a little more attractive in the new version. But we also put in the confidence intervals. So on this example, this institution and this one are statistically different, but the rest there's a lot of overlap just because there is. That's what the data shows. So that's the overall quality of educational experience. These items come from the student experience survey, these from the graduate outcome survey. The graduate outcome survey longitudinal, there's not enough data yet for us to present. And so the national reports and all that other stuff goes up there, but not the comparison data. Okay. And it aggregates more than 1 year to get enough numbers. This is the nerd section, which has the national reports, all the national report tables. They are long, they are turgid, they're not an exciting read, but there's a lot of information in there. We also give you the tables in case you want to pop them in reports. And there's additional tables that aren't in the report just for extra information for benchmarking purposes, and an infographic for those who just can't be found reading big one. Okay. We also have a provider portal that institutions can log into to get additional information. We'll put white papers. On the main website, there's methodological reports. You can see everything about how the surveys are done. It's very transparent. We put in QILT materials, webinars. We do monthly webinars for the survey managers and the sector about operationally how to run these things and going through the results when the reports are made available. Anyone can get into this, so you just need to, at the very bottom of the website in really, really, really tiny letters, it says login. Like a little whisper, because otherwise all the students will try for login addresses. So you find that and you just put in for an account. And if you're from an institution, we'll approve you and you can access any of those kind of materials.
Okay, so just clarifying that you don't need permission from your institution, you can just seek it to log in from you guys, and if you're from a legitimate, okay, that's nice.
The tragedy is that these are mostly operational materials. I mean, it's not really in-depth data, but I will tell you what your institution holds in a moment. This is disruption. Okay. So today I'm just going to talk about the student experience survey in detail. It'll be too much detail, but you can have access, you can have this presentation either through these guys or we can put it up on the website and you can get yourselves a login and get it. No props. So the SES, as I said, fully online survey, current, commencing and completing undergrad and postgrad coursework students. Okay, I'm just going to barrel through a bit. There's a number of themes. Call them focus areas because they're not statistical scales. Overall educational experience is a single item. There's overall, how would you rate your experience? Excellent, very good. Skills development, learner engagement, teaching quality, learning resources, and for our purposes in this room probably, student support. It's run in about August, September. That means that a student has been through a whole cycle of a course usually, if they started from the year. We're looking for people who've been through at least one assessment cycle because we ask questions about those sorts of things. The institutions get all their data back. So institutions get data files at unit record level. They get student ID back, all the demographics back, everything. They get them in SPSS files, CSV files, and we also create Tableau package workbooks that we make available to the institutions. So out of the box, they can do the analysis with all of these things calculated in. The sample, as I said, centrally sourced through HEAMS. We send it back to the institutions. They attach email and phone numbers and stuff like that for us to run the surveys. We have response maximisation strategies that are quite well established. We have rolling prize draws, so you do it in week 1, you get 4 chances, week 2, 3 chances. By week 4, you're just doing it because you're a philanthropist. Email invitations and reminders, tragically, 1 invitation and up to 8 reminders. We bomb them about twice a week. But we only get about 1% of students refusing, who get back to us and go, stop, and we stop. So they can opt out at any time. It's all things, some of them whinge. But in terms of the effectiveness of each of those reminders, it's well worth that level of reminder activity. We also do targeted reminder calls where we ring students if we have their phone numbers, or SMS them saying, don't forget, do your survey. And if they can opt out at that time too. And they're still considered an online response. We have a 24-hour help desk as well. Don't want to shout at somebody. So institutional engagement is crucial. The difference between an institution that gets 30% and an institution that gets nearly 60% is the institution itself. It's how much they are engaging their students locally. Central Queensland, I think, we're getting massive response rates because it's all built into their strat planning processes. Academics know about it, results pushed out. Deakin University put up posters. You said, we did. Gets a lot of buy-in, and so they're the institutions that get quite high response rates. We had a little bit of excitement last year where we had a 10% drop. It started late because of the contract, still the contract hadn't been signed. There was the sexual harassment on campus thing, came out exactly at the same time, distracted everybody. There were issues with whitelist. Last year was a bit of a shocker, but this year we're already at about 156,000 responses on day 9, and we only got to 206 last year. So we're already at about 25% response rate. So I think we're going to smash through the 36% without a problem. We're aiming back at that 46 or so. Because once you're getting those kind of response rates for this kind of survey, that's massive. So it's going really well. So it's well worth institutions leveraging this. There is power in this. Okay. For no good reason, I put this up here. These are the national results over the last 2 years on all the different indicators. This one is learner engagement. You'll see it's a lot lower. A number of institutions see this pattern. I was at an institution at one point, shall remain nameless, where there was a small panic at that point. My God, we have a problem with learner engagement. They put in place 4 different projects. We're going to train people on learner engagement. We're going to call students and engage them, and we're going to went on and on. And then it didn't work. It made no difference to those numbers. And they said it didn't work. Our students just aren't engaged. Those bastards. So giving up, it's them, it's not us. No. You need to look at the data because it tells a different story. I'm not going to go through these things in any detail, but you'll have this preso so you can have a look. And this is all in the back of the national report. These are the actual items in the survey. So no, you went too fast, go back. These are the focus areas. So skills development, in my view, are the outcomes. This is the students' self-reported skills development. Commencing versus completing, you can see the differences. For your purposes in studiosity, probably the written communication skills, you'd be wanting to look at that and see how the students are reporting their development from commencing to completing to see if you're adding value there. So that's that set of little questions. Next one, learner engagement. If you put 4 people in a room and asked them what learner engagement was, you would get 5 definitions. Nobody knows. It's one of those buzzword things that we all think we know what it is, but usually you'll have people talking in a room shouting at each other with no real idea what the other one is talking about. This is a very idiosyncratic version of learner engagement. A lot of this came out of the NSSE, the American National Survey of Student Engagement. Then there was the Aussie in Australia, and you can see a certain influence in some of these items. What a lot of these questions are looking at are student-on-student action. It's collaborative learning. It's students working with other students. a number of institutions, there are differences in your different methodologies about how much that happens. There's felt prepared for study and had a sense of belonging to the institution, very different animal, but and been given opportunities to interact with local students. Don't ask. The department realised that this focus area, maybe not ideal, and so they put out a project last year for ASA to review this set of questions. Because you know, government is like turning the Titanic. So they didn't want too much change. Review it, but be gentle. So they tried to tinker with it and make it a bit better, but it kind of got worse. And so there's a report, you can get the report on that review on the QILT website, but they've kind of just parked it for the moment because, in fact, my view is we should just start again, have a new focus area, but that's still in the wind. The department, I'll show you in a bit. So next one. Teaching quality, slight misnomer, but there it is. So thinking about your course, that overall experience item is in here because if you are looking for what correlates most highly with the overall experience, it is teaching. I don't think I'm telling anyone in this room anything that will surprise them. Your teaching quality is your driver of the student experience. And you would be surprised at how many senior managers at universities look stunned by this information. Really? It's the parking? No. This is what drives the experience. And it's also the thing that drives that skills development. We've done some studies. It's a directional thing. That's your important animal. Okay, next one. Learning resources, insofar as they influence teaching, also affect the overall experience. But again, when you're thinking about what is government measuring in these focus areas, there's this notion that this is an important set of questions. The non-universities tend to do quite a bit worse, in inverted commas, in this area. And to a large degree, that's the teaching in student spaces, because they tend to be small, central city campuses with not much in the way of facilities. Assignments, books, notes, libraries have more data than God. All of those kinds of things. Yeah. And then finally, your student support set of questions. Now, when you look at this, you will see there is a particular idea in here of what student support is. And it's a very government, I did my education in the 80s, thought process behind all of this. So during 2007, to what extent have you found careers advisors to be available or helpful? A lot of institutions don't do careers like that anymore. You have careers fairs, you have employer meet and greets, you have breakfasts with employer groups, you have other activities that aren't careers advisors. During 2017, have you found academic or learning advisors to be? Is that what you call them in your institution? Are you operating like that? How does that gel with something like the Studiosity program? Are they learning advisors? What are they exactly? So this is asking a set of particular questions against which institutions are ranked, and they may not be ideal, but certainly they may be a good stick in the sand for you to be able to say, this is where we're sitting. Okay. And then finally there's those open text things where the students write lots of stuff. We also ask them about their living arrangements, financial circumstances, and whether they'd seriously considered leaving in the last year. Okay. So, again, I'm not going to go through this in any detail. When institutions get their Tableau report, the 39 institutions that are members of Universities Australia have a data sharing agreement. And in that data sharing agreement, they share their data down to the unit record. In your university, they have information where they can benchmark down to the most minute detail. We also give them one of these Tableau reports, and in that report, we give them de-identified data on that side, so they can't do institution by institution Coke Pepsi comparisons, but they can certainly compare themselves to the rest of the sector. the university sector. If there are any non-university people in here that are, small, sorry, you don't have this. We're trying to work on it, but it doesn't exist yet. But you can then filter this down to commencing versus completing. You can look male, female, you can look at Indigenous, non-Indigenous, you can look at high, medium, low socioeconomic status, you can look at who considered leaving and who didn't, and what their different responses are on all of those focus areas. So this is only one dashboard. There's dashboards down to the individual items, and there's dashboards down to the individual course level that institutions can use out of the box. Okay. So this is just that general one, just to give you a slightly bigger look. And you can see we had a little drop last year in the overall experience, but we're still going to find out if that was noise. And the learner engagement is quite a bit lower. Panic stations institution. Okay, next one. When we look at external students, you'll have noticed that those other numbers didn't shift by much. In fact, they went up slightly. But the learner engagement one tanked, seriously. Because those students aren't engaging to the same degree in student collaborative learning strategies. They're tending to more, getting resources, working independently. And so it tanks it. We did a paper on this, and the department did a paper on this, which is what led to that review of this focus area. On the QILT website, they exclude just for that one indicator external students, because places like Charles Sturt were just looked like they had 20%. And people think these are satisfaction scales, so it was misrepresenting what it was. So that's come out. But you need to look at the data to understand it. And that institution I was talking about before, oh my God, we have a problem with it, with learner engagement. No, they didn't. They just had a very large external cohort. And when you looked at their external to their external, in fact, it wasn't a great deal worse. They were on about par with the rest of the sector. But that's not to say you should do anything about it, because when you run the numbers, if students aren't working with other students, their oral communication and their team skills development are lower. So these kinds of activities are important for student learning, but when you measure them like this, they can be misrepresented. So if you were talking to TEXA, you would say, yes, we've looked at that, we have a very large external cohort, this is what this is, and we're on a par with the sector. Okay.
Like you say, though, this big thing about the questions you're actually asking there to determine satisfaction of student engagement. I mean, if it's all about interaction, that's a slightly different thing than engagement. That sense of belonging question is really the important one.
It's not even just a slightly different definition of learner engagement.
Yeah,
exactly. I would say idiosyncratic ones.
Yeah, so.
You need to look at the items. These are not scales. The statistician will tell you can't look at the items. It's all about the scale. These are not scales in this survey. You should look and dig into it. Yep, go next one. These are the individual items. So back one. So those are the internal, that's actually everybody. What they're talking about, sense of belonging, felt prepared for study, interacted with different students. So that's the data at the individual item level. If you now look at external students only, back. But you see, they felt as prepared for study as the internal students, but when you're looking at how much they're interacting with other students, they tank. Okay, so in a tableau report, this is for student support. So what an institution has in their institution already is they can see the UA institution on one side, and they can see what your students are saying on the other, and they can then break that down by all of these demographics. They can look at it by course level, they can look at it by study level, study area. You can see if it's your engineers that are having more trouble. You can look at domestic versus international, you can look at non-English speaking background students. It's all in there, and your institutions have this. What's happening in the sector is it's hitting the sector, but it's not being disseminated to the people that need to know this stuff. And you guys need to know this stuff. Okay. So in terms of surveys and other data sources, this is your strategic planning process. It's the least version. Pam calls it the pistons, but it looks like a combustion engine of some sort. So you've all been through these things. You've got your enormous strategic plan with your goals and philosophy statements and all the rest of it. And under that, you usually have enabling plans, like your learning and teaching plan, your industry engagement plan, often with your motherhood statement. We want to be the preeminent university with students saying this. Okay. But where are you getting your data to support these things? These kinds of surveys, including unit teacher surveys, they are not surveys to find the drivers of your teaching or to measure learning per se. They are instruments to get data for your performance indicators. They are to do with your business. So what you do is you look through the plans and you look at where you can already get data from all of these surveys. I was talking to someone recently who was just about to try and do a survey that was going to try and pull data that he's already collected. You need to look in there and see what it already collects. But then the next thing you need to do is what's not in there. What the government is measuring in those surveys, what is in their head, may not be the only thing in our head. Whereas there's not a lot of questions about work integrated learning in the SES, and there probably should be. There's not a lot of questions about capstone projects. There probably should be. It's an older view of what teaching and learning is. It's not quite as old as the old AGS, but it's not contemporary. So we need to look at those things and say, what else do we need to know to tell the story? Because it's not all necessarily in there. But you should be looking at these things to determine what's missing. Okay. So, performance indicators align with strategic plans, quality systems, blah, blah, blah. If you get this kind of stuff embedded in those, that drives response rate, it drives these surveys. But really what's missing? It's a crowded survey space. I was once somewhere where two people on two different desks were about to launch a census survey of virtually the same cohort because they both had student satisfaction with whatever it was as their performance measure in their own PD, what's the name? Their appraisal. And they're about to launch a survey. How am I going to collect that? I know. We'll do a census survey. At the student graduations, well, we run a survey after graduation every year. 95% of our students are satisfied for the last 10 years. It's fantastic. Stop doing it. Why do you keep asking them if you know the answer? Stop it. Stop it. And it was cannibalising the actual graduate survey because the name was similar. We have to stop cannibalising these things. We need to make use of the QILT surveys. We're sitting, I reckon we'll sit at least a 45% response rate. Again, this year, we're looking at 606,000 students in this run of the student experience survey. We're looking at 400,000 or 500,000 in the graduate surveys. This is millions of survey responses. If your institution's added some questions to the end, you're getting some really robust data. So what is missing? What is it that you guys need to be collecting to better measure student support? Because student support, if you're asking the right questions, is actually a really important part of the equation. But we're probably not asking the right questions. If institutions got together, as a cohort, we would add it to the standard instrument. Currently we charge about, it might cost a couple of grand to add questions to the end of the survey. We charge once for the programming, and then every year it just stays with the survey. If a number of institutions get together, it's cheaper because we're only having to program once and then apply it all. If you all added it, it'd be cheap as chips. A couple of hundred each. It's not a lot of money. You could, for the cost of sending one senior manager to the UA conference, you could add a pile of questions to these surveys and get the data back to the unit record level. Your institutions can merge this data through their BI systems, through their data warehouses, to all their enrolment data. You can do analyses here where you could look at students' average results over their subjects and their levels on various of these questions. You can add questions to the end about specific initiatives that your institution is taking, say careers fairs, say work integrated learning, say, capstone project work, day studiosity your students were participating, to ask about whether they had engaged in that activity, what their view of it was. And if you already knew, we could actually just filter on those things. So if you wanted specific information from international students, if you wanted specific information about students who accessed a particular service and you knew who they were, you can just target things to them. So it's very powerful. The information is already out there. You've got a lot of information already, but it's customisable and you're able to disrupt this in order to utilise it for your own institutional purposes and then split that back to places like TEXA and the department. That answers.
I'm sure there's many questions.
And Pam and I will be here over lunch, so if you're free to ask us questions. Nothing?
Hi, Lisa, Pam, thank you. I just have two quick questions. The first thing that I see, and I think many other people would agree with me here, is that students are over-surveyed.
Yes.
You know, like sometimes they have a dozen or so surveys to fill out. So your idea of maybe taking some of those surveys and getting enrolled in them almost into the end of the quarter, I think is a very, very strong one. And then the second question I have is, with the website, have you really dug down to see how students make decisions based on QILT?
The QILT website is confirmatory. A student who doesn't know what they want to do, what they want to be when they grow up, if they hit QILT, it's not going to help them at all. If you've got a student who's making a decision between a couple of institutions, then when they do use it, they use it reasonably sensibly. So I did see a student once getting on there and seeing that the overall satisfaction was lower for a particular institution, but their job outcomes were quite a bit higher. And they went, I'm going to that one because I can do with being a bit cracked off at school if I'm going to be getting more likely to be getting work. But again, it's a particular view of what is success. So it's looking at full-time employment rates, median salary. One thing that will be new on the new site is instead of asking the students for their salaries, they're going to be pulling ATO data, 1 year, 5 year, 9 year, on the website. So that data is going to be available. We're currently negotiating with the department about how we can then pull that back to give it back to the institutions because they've quite got that big. But hopefully we'll be able to put it into those Tableau reports to give some level of benchmarking ability as well. So it's not ideal because it's at the study area. If the student wants to do aeronautical engineering, they can only really get data about engineering in general. But it gives them a sense. I think it's an interesting confirmatory activity for students to do towards the end of their journey of deciding where to go. So there's the admissions portal as well. You know that new admissions portal that the department are pushing out? Yes, no? Okay. Separate to us, the department are putting out a university admissions portal to try and centralise and make consistent the student's journey to going into a course. So like the old VTAC systems and whatever the tax. So they go in and they're trying to make consistent things like, university goes, you need 97 ATAR to get in, and they took people at 60. Now they have to give the range. They have to indicate if there are bonus subjects, they have to indicate if there's direct entry and what the requirements for direct entry are in a consistent format. And so there's this admissions portal being built, should be released relatively soon, and that'll display pool data against an institution or against a study area. And then the students can click on that hopefully at some point and then go to QILT and look those things up in more detail if they want to. So I think there's an appetite in government to make a one-stop shop for students to be able to get information about their further study pathways, but it's early days.
Thank you.
So just a question about the study area compared to the institution. The students can see the department level data, so they could be like, I want to do engineering wherever, but that might be quite low. They might have some other courses that are great, so the students are not really comparing engineering departments at different universities, right? They're just comparing the overall institution.
No. So they will go in there and they will get engineering,
Okay.
and they might pick Swinburne.
And that's just the
Western
engineering
Australia.
data from those universities.
Just the
Right.
engineering study area. But that's an aggregation of all the
All the
different
different
engineering.
engineering, yeah, but it's not the whole institution.
No. They can look at the whole institution as well, so what the general vibe is, but they can look by study, individual study area. And it's 21 study areas. But when we sample in these surveys, we sample at 45 study areas, and so we push institutions for that level of representativeness,
Yeah.
but then that gets aggregated up when it goes up. Just because you saw how big some of those confidence intervals were, and they're 2 years of aggregated data. So once you're breaking it down study area by institution, the numbers are getting smaller. And it's kind of the trade-off is accuracy versus usefulness, but it is what it is. But in the institution level, you can drill down to individual reports. You can get faculty reports, you can get campus reports, you can get all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Just thinking around student satisfaction survey, I guess I'm more interested in the 64% who didn't respond. And I'm wondering if it's work in that area, so what we tend to be more interested in are the ones that are not engaging.
Yeah, and that is the problem with anything. Student surveys are not the disgruntled, they're the gruntled. They're the students who are already engaged enough to participate in the evaluation of their programs. It is the perennial problem, always has been. The higher response rates we get, the more you dig into those less engaged students. So really we rely on the institutions to really start moving those people up.
And Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about the marketing refresh to try and
So yeah, we target our marketing and our response maximisation strategies to the lowest performing areas. So we tend to target a lot of stuff to less than engineering boys and business and management. Business and management students, you'd think they'd want to give feedback, but no. So it's about convincing the students that you are using the data and that their voice is important. Because most students, if you ask them in the street, do you do your surveys? They say, no. Why not? No, it doesn't really anyway. Get lecturers going. Don't worry about it. We don't pay any attention to that stuff. And that culture persists. So it's until we get that trust of the system and that this is actually an independent way for students to have voice. But the minute you say that, academics tend to get upset and go, you're just making it out like we're bad. And so we've got to try and don't tell us how bad your uni is, because they go, yeah, I'm going to tell you. And the lecturers get upset. There's that fine line that we're attempting to. But 46% is massive for these kinds of things. A normal unsolicited survey, 20%. Oh,
I guess budgets and non-status positions that we go to 54%, still the majority, right? So our work will be doing things around student support. That's our target area straight away. That almost
Yes.
identifies what our target area is.
Definitely. And again, all we can do is encourage them. So posters in the student support area go, do your student experience survey, tell us about your experience. Your experience is important. Help other students do this. All of those messaging to kind of socialise this, then you'll start to get bigger response rates. It is what it is. It's good, but it's not ideal because it is the less engaged students who don't do it. For the graduate outcome survey, we are trying to target people who are baristas, not barristers. We want to get the people who aren't in their forever job to tell us where they are now, because over time, we want to see where they're going. But they go, I'm just a barista, I'm not going to fill it out. So we do big pushes to try and convince everyone that their story is as important as anybody else's. So it's about engaging.
Does that mean the more students that you get to fill it out, the worse your results will be?
Yeah, often. That's often a trend. Because you're engaging the people who aren't engaged, who are less likely. When I was at a university, we did an analysis of it, and we found the students who responded to the surveys were students with higher than average results, because they are more engaged, they're more interested to provide that kind of content back to them, that 360-degree feedback kind of notion. We had one area once that did a clicker survey with the students of the same questions that were asked in another survey. They asked the students those questions, and it actually doubled the response rate for that unit because the students understood that they took the information seriously and they really wanted to know. It's that message that you need to get out to students. And then they participate. But often they don't feel like their voice is heard. They fill out these things and they disappear into the void. And in fact, in a lot of institutions, it is disappearing into the void. I mean, it's about the academics and the practitioners in the institutions asking for this data and starting to use it. That'll push it through.
And that's part of the reason that we were so pleased about being invited to this. It is a huge and very rich data source that we would like to have more people use. And so it's really, I mean, Lisa and I, our job is to go out and make sure that people know that this data exists. They know what the limitations are, and we're very transparent about the methods, but it's there and people should use it. And it should be well known. And there's been a bit of talk about, well, do we change the colors and blah, blah, blah. And it was finally decided that, what we need to do is stick with the brand. It's starting to become recognized, and we just need, sort of like the first speakers, it's taken a while, but it's finally starting to take off, and we just need to hold the course.
And as I said before, it's been designed very traditionally. Governments massively risk averse. They like consistency. Getting them to change anything is like pulling teeth. But through the ability to add extra questions to these things, the sector can take some control of this. If the sector adds some questions to the end, we run it a couple of times, we test it, and we show that it might be a focus area that works around things like work integrated learning, different careers, approaches, all of that stuff. Then we present that to the department, and they like things already to have been tested. They don't like to just add questions at random. So that's the power that the sector has. But it's about them deciding what the important things to measure are.
One more. The longitudinal data, is there any plan for that to be more than 3 years out from graduation? Or is 3 years, is that just...
3 years is the current one.
Yeah.
We would like to take it up to 5. And so we might put that to the department for the next contract, for example. The other thing, personally, I think is missing from the QILT suite is a survey of exit students who've withdrawn. Because I think that's missing from this data. There's a lot of talk about attrition. If attrition becomes a performance indicator, we should be collecting independent data about why people are leaving. Because for some it's a positive outcome, they've got a job in their area. For some it's micro-credentialing, maybe the day of the qualification is over. For some it might be that we haven't met their needs, that the careers has changed, we're not supporting them enough in the transition period. There's all of that stuff where we don't have any independent data, but we're going to be measuring attrition. I think that's something that's missing as well. Because this is a survey of students who made it to August and then did the survey. So again, supporting your position. The people who were going to leave have left before they ever get to the SEM. For the graduate survey, the people who weren't going to finish aren't completing that graduate survey. So we need as well to be getting to the people that are at risk.
So I guess in relation to the attrition question, is there, and this may already be the case because you've got means data, but attrition is also, I've left my uni because I started there and I went somewhere else, whereas
Yes.
I actually wanted to go in the first place.
And that's why an exit survey is important too, is to find out people who went. Sonia Whiteley, who was with our program, wrote a paper many years ago where she looked at attrition. How many students were never yours in the first place and had used you to go to their preferred course at another institution? So it's how many people came to you and did the same course somewhere else, came to you, did a different course somewhere else, came to you and did a different course with you. I mean, they're all attrition. So it's getting more of a sense of that so that you can tell the story. So all of this is about telling the story of your institution and of your students and of your outcomes.
So, sorry, taking the forward. It may not be a company, it may not be other ones, so is that the way that I'm sensing that's the way the government's going in relation to that? So are they thinking about how they can record or how they can allow us to catch that information?
One of the more powerful groups in the sector is ANA, the planners, the university planners. There's a DVCA group as well that interfaces with QILT, and there's a QILT working party. I think you want to be talking to all of those people, and they're the ones who need to be lobbying the department about how these things frame up. Because performance indicators are still things being talked about. There may be an election, there may be not. Somebody else might win the election, but they may still try and bring in performance indicators. I think it's an ongoing conversation, but attrition does come up in those conversations, and so I think it behooves us as a sector to be collecting that kind of stuff, and we would recommend that that's done centrally, but we've got a vested interest, but it does make some sense.
Thanks so much, Lisa and Pam.